We're here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network via Zoom right now, and I am talking with Anthony Brusa. He is a Post Doctoral Research Associate at the University of Minnesota. Anthony, thank you for taking the time to visit with us today.
Thank you for having me on.
So the reason we're talking to our friends to the north of us is because they've come up with a new test to help us better detect Palmer Amaranth. Anthony, do you want to tell us a little bit about that tool that you guys have developed?
Certainly. So one of the main issues that we deal with Palmer Amaranth is the fact that it's very difficult to identify compared to other related species. There's a lot of pigweeds that are problematic, but Palmer is much higher impact compared to some of the other ones that are out there. And it's on several prohibited species lists in the upper Midwest. So we wanted to develop a tool that would make it a lot easier for people to identify if you had Palmer versus if you had, for example, red root pigweed. And also that we wanted it to be applicable to seed testing, because a lot of the introductions that we've been seeing have been coming through contaminated seed mixes.
All right, so and like you said, it's very similar, and so what does it take? What differentiates it first of all from the pigweed that makes it stand out for these tests to work?
So in terms of the grower's concern, the whole thing with Palmer is it's much more aggressive. It produces far more seed and it can grow very rapidly. It can grow 2 inches a day under good conditions, which will let it easily overtop most of the crops that you're growing out there. So that's why we were so focused on trying to figure out how to identify it correctly. So in order to develop our test, what we did was we designed a test that targeted specific differences in genetic code that only Palmer has compared to the other related species.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about how the test works and what it's gonna. Well, I know what it's going to do. So tell us a little bit how it works.
Yeah, so there's 2 ways to apply the test. One is if you have a plant that you suspect is Palmer, you can just take a leaf of that, send it into the lab. They'll pull DNA out of that and tell you what you have. So that's pretty straightforward. The one that we spent a lot of time making sure we got very good sensitivity on was the bulk seed testing. So if you look at Palmer seed, they're very tiny. They're about 1 millimeter. So think about the size of a poppy seed. Now imagine you have 200 of those, and one of those potentially is Palmer. Our test is able to identify 1 out of 200 in a pool of seeds.
Well, that's definitely a very sensitive and very accurate then to be able to get down to that level. And so now the sending it into the lab, and how long a wait is it right now for farmers to get an answer on that test?
Yeah, so currently ours isn't available. If you're using the existing tests that are out there, it depends on how much they're charging you, if there's a rush fee, but usually we're looking at like a 2-week turnaround on existing tests out there. A lot of that really is due to the difficulty of getting work done under COVID conditions when you can't have that many people in the lab. In terms of our test, it's going to be very similar in terms of the workflow. If it was just a single test, something comes in, we can turn around and get an answer same day. But if you have 300 of them come in, obviously it's going to take a few days to get a response out.
And so, for farmers, having to, figure out how to manage it, it's probably best for them to be talking with their crop advisors as well to kind of plan for that answer to come back as Palmer so they can get ahead of it. Because as you said, with the amount of seeds it produces and as rapidly as it reproduces, they definitely want to get ahead of it, but make sure they're going after the right species.
Definitely. This is one of those things when you're dealing with any sort of invasive threat like this, you're looking at a coordinated effort from multiple different groups. We're developing these tools so that they can be deployed, but the information from those tests, that's going to come back to the crop consultants and the growers to act upon.
So I guess the next question is there going to be an increased accuracy? Is this increased accuracy over the tests that are currently available, the tests that you guys have developed?
So the tests out there were accurate, but we weren't sure exactly how accurate because the testing pool that they were compared against was fairly limited. So part of this test that we did validation against a very large panel. We collected samples of pigweed from across the United States. We collected some from northern Mexico, which is part of the native range. We have samples from South America and a population from Africa as well. So we have the largest group that we could possibly compare against, and our test worked against all of those groups.
And so what's the timetable for the release of your test so it can be used for the general populace?
And so this was developed as a collaboration between University of Minnesota and Colorado State. So they're nailing down the last few agreements regarding the licensing. But once all those decisions have been made, we'll be able to start licensing that out to private labs who are interested in running the test. And Colorado State University will be offering the service itself through one of their internal business units. And that should be before the end of this year.
Okay, so I'm going to call back to my days of being a Minnesota broadcaster. I know the U of M based in St. Paul, but you have research labs out there or research stations around the state. Are those tests going to be available, say, I came from Southwest Minnesota, so Lamberton's research station was out there. Are they going to be available at those stations, or is it going to be strictly in the Twin Cities?
So UMN decided that they're going to be licensing the test through Colorado State rather than setting up testing themselves. However, there is a number of testing labs that are available within Minnesota to the various growers, just across the state line for you guys as well. And if they're interested in licensing this test, then they'd be able to offer it to you as well.
All right, sounds good. So definitely you want to put the word out there for producers around the country to be looking out for that and find out when their states are going to have that available for them to use. Anthony, is there anything you want to add for our Iowa producers here before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I just want to mention that this project really was a team effort. We had 12 different people on my team working on this. I mentioned University of Minnesota as sort of being the central hub, and Colorado State University as being very important too as well. But we have a team member at Michigan State University now who's doing a lot of important weed science work. The extension groups for the university were really important for getting the word out there to the growers. And I worked with Minnesota Department of Ag, and both MDA and Extension were really important in keeping our work grounded and focused on the concerns of growers.
Well, Anthony, I thank you very much for telling us about that new tool, and we look forward to hearing more about it as it gets released.
I'm happy to share. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me.
All right, that's Anthony Brusa with the U of M. He's a postdoctoral research associate here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.